Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching Primetime Asia on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Flooding in northern Malaysia has displaced over 5,000 people, including 5,142 evacuees in Kelantan, where days of heavy rain have forced residents into 26 relief centers. Local authorities also reported 528 evacuees in Terengganu as meteorological officials warn of continuous heavy rains and strong winds across the region. According to Vietnam's Environment Ministry, floods in Vietnam have claimed 90 lives with 12 people still missing. Torrential rain and landslides have battered south-central provinces since late October. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has announced in Dushanbe that Beijing will boost trade and investment with Tajikistan, while praising Tajikistan's support on China's core interests, including Taiwan, as Beijing and Tajikistan agreed to deepen mineral and security cooperation, including joint patrols. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told Italian President Giorgia Meloni at the G20 summit in South Africa that China welcomes more Italian companies into its market and expects Italy to ensure a fair, non-discriminatory environment for Chinese investment, as both sides signaled a push to strengthen bilateral cooperation. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has said that it was shocking and accused Japan of crossing a red line and sending a dangerous sign when asked about earlier comments by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The diplomatic crisis has been rising for over 2 weeks now and has spilled into trade relations, with China escalating the dispute to UN chief. Myanmar's junta says it has arrested 1,594 nationals in just 5 days during major raids on the Shwa Kokok scam hub, seizing 2,893 computers, 21,750 phones, and over 100 Starlink receivers. The crackdown comes as internet scam networks continue to thrive in Myanmar's borderlands amid civil war. Cyclone Fina has slammed Australia's Northern Territory with 205 km/h winds, knocking out power for about 19,000 people in Darwin. Local Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro has said that the Category 3 storm caused property damage and flooded roads, but left no reported injuries as crews began assessing widespread destruction. The United States, Ukraine, and key European partners are gathering in Geneva today for critical talks on U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Geneva and is joined by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. We start with Africa. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Brazil's President Lula da Silva and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The three IBSA leaders have greeted each other formally before beginning their trilateral discussions. Earlier this year, Modi and Lula held a phone conversation where they reaffirmed their shared goal to boost bilateral trade to more than $20 billion annually by the year 2030. A significant rise from last year's $12 billion figure. Meanwhile, the G20 formally adopted a declaration addressing the global climate crisis and other key challenges, but the move prompted strong reaction from Washington, with the White House accusing South Africa of, quote, weaponizing its leadership of the group during this year's summit. Now for this discussion, we welcome Rabinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what political trade-offs does India and Brazil face in pursuing major expansion of bilateral trade while navigating differing strategic alignments within the G20? And how should India and South Africa react to the critic by U.S.?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, much feels within wheels in this whole, if we were to look at the three-country meetup, the India, Brazil, South Africa, as well as even the bilaterals between Brazil and India and South Africa and India. One, I think, interesting thing to note would be that all three of these countries are right now not in much goodwill with the Trump administration. Keep aside India, but India is being penalized with the tariffs, right?
Yes.
But there you have Brazil, uh, with whom Trump is very angry. And in fact, I think only today or yesterday, Bolsonaro has been arrested. Okay.
Yes.
And I think the Trump administration would further ratchet up its anti-Lula rhetoric, at least. Similarly, here, South Africa, which Trump or America has boycotted for reasons they say that, the white minorities in South Africa are being discriminated and facing violence. That is the reason per se. But I think America's step towards boycotting the G20 is also linked to the fact that South Africa has been very vocal against Israel and the war crimes at the International ICC court. So that's been an additional factor which the US administration and a good chunk of US politicians who favor Israel are very unhappy with South Africa. So I think on the one hand, if you were to see the visuals, the optopolitics coming out of these three leaders meeting, India, Brazil, South Africa, that is not a very happy picture for the United States in a big picture. Now, that said, each nation, India, Brazil, South Africa, are navigating our own, trajectories. As far as India and Brazil are concerned, definitely yes, there is much to, explore and develop further in areas of cooperation, ranging from, you name it. Trade, of course, is one big area in which I think all nations look to progress. So trade is definitely one. Similarly, with South Africa, yes, trade to some extent, but also it's more about the global architecture and the effectiveness of global institutions. You see, like even in the G20, whatever the statements they are coming up with, or they do come up with, or even in other multilateral forum in the world of today for us, uh, the the subsequent steps on them are very often missing because the institutions have no teeth to carry that forward and their divisions with it. Even now, let's say at the G20, the declaration which has been issued, the joint declaration on climate change, even right.
Yes.
One, the US did not participate even in the discussions. And they came up at a certain stage when the draft was ready. They said, no, we do not agree with this draft. But the G20 went ahead and issued the draft. So what we can see is definitely, yes, uh, nations other than the United States are trying to, come to their own mutual arrangements with each other or via regional or other blocs. So the IBSA, I would look at it from that perspective.
Right. And how could India and Brazil's ambitious trade goals influence the trilateral balance within IBSA and its role in shaping global South priorities?
Certainly. See, as far as India and Brazil trade is concerned, one factor, of course, we've got to look at is the distance between the two nations. So the freight, or let's say the transportation costs do go up. Okay. Now, on the one hand, by the way, if the India-Middle East corridor linking to Europe becomes a reality, then some of those costs could come down because the overall, distance and freight all the way from Brazil to India or India to Brazil would be shortened. So one is the element of the freight component. The second is, a range of other what we could call as non-tariff barriers. Okay, on the one hand, there are tariff barriers. We have certain import duties. They have certain import duties on certain goods. Okay, which need to be harmonized and rationalized between the two nations. So the working groups between India and Brazil on trade are working on those issues of what the tariffs can be, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of products, nails, pencils, to you name it, whatever, engines. Brazil has good aerospace manufacturing, for example, right, which India has been exploring. In fact, I think we've got a partnership going on also out here in India for the Embraer aircraft.
Yes.
So the element of the tariffs is one. Then the non-tariff barriers or non-tariff hurdles. What are the standards which we accept, which Brazil accepts? Our standards, does Brazil accept? And it varies across range, the entire range of goods which are out there, standards on agri products, standards on engineering items, standards on you name it and everything, right? So a mutual recognition of each other country's standards is often a very top priority or one of the main focus to enable smoother trade. So these are two areas between India and Brazil which I think need to be fine-tuned.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Sir Rabinder Sachdev for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Middle East, Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqai has reiterated that Iran continues to engage with the International Atomic Energy Agency within the framework of its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In a separate statement, Baqai has responded sharply to the confrontational actions taken by 3 European countries and the United States against Iran at the IAEA. He has warned that these actions would have consequences, highlighting the Iran-IAEA understanding reached in Cairo, which he claimed is now impossible to implement. Let's listen in.
ایران در چارچوب تعهدات خودش وفق NPT معاهده منع اشاعه به تعاملات خودش با آژانس تقابلی سه کشور اروپایی و آمریکا علیه ایران در آژانس حتما تبعات خودش رو در پی داره و یک نمونهش هم عرض کردم و اون این که تفاهمی که در قاهره بین ایران و آژانس به نتیجه رسید عملاً دیگه امکان اجرا نداره و ما رسما هم این رو اعلام کردیم که دیگه این
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Sir Rabinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for staying with us. Now, what are we to make of this situation with Iran declaring that Iran-IAEA understanding from Cairo is impossible to implement?
Thank you. I think the big picture is that what Iran says, it has suspended its activities of enrichment, right?
Yes.
It has not said that it will never, it has not relinquished the right. So what Iran says is that under whichever agreement or understanding, at present it has suspended, but it has not relinquished the right to enrich uranium. That's one. Secondly, I think it's quite clear to all nations, if possible, if they can, to go the route of developing a nuclear weapon. If you have a nuclear weapon, then you are in a different league altogether. Iran has seen the fate of Saddam Hussein, Iraq. Iraq did not have any weapons of mass destruction, and the war, the Americans, when after 9/11, they pursued Iraq. Iraq would not have faced that war if Iraq in reality had the nuclear weapons. So that's a big message out there in the world, and especially in the Middle East, Arab state. Libya, Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program, and within a couple of years,
Yes.
he was hounded out and killed. So Iran, to the extent possible, will not give up its right to enrich uranium. So I think the entire discussions and agreements which are out there and the safeguards and the inspections by the IAEA, which are being built into an agreement or which IAEA wants or the European powers and America want, Iran would, I think, okay, and Iran, but also realizes the reality, realizes the ground situation. It is cornered at present. To some extent, Iran has been cornered.
Yes.
That short 12-day war, whatever it was, Iran says that, we've come back from it, but it did damage Iran, right?
Yes.
So the firepower which the West has, which the US has, which the Israel has, is immense. They can hurt Iran. So, but at the same time, Iran, I think, wants to keep, not I think, that's what they're doing. They want to keep their individuality and their pride as a sovereign nation. So I think that's the trade-off which Iran is playing right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that background and giving the example of Iraq as well. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Sir Rabinder Sachdev for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to Bangladesh. Protests have erupted across Bangladesh, with thousands demanding the execution of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina after a court sentenced her to death for alleged killings during the 2024 student protests. The ruling has delivered by the International Crimes Tribunal on November 17th also sentenced former Home Minister Asaduzaman Khan Kamal for crimes against humanity. Hasina, who was absent from the court, faces calls for extradition from India. The protests led by the BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami have raised tensions, with demonstrators accusing Hasina's government of using excessive force during the 2024 protests. Amidst these tensions, the Hindu minority continues to face escalating violence, with reports of over 2,200 incidents in 2024. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Shoaib Chaudhry. He's the editor at Blitz, joins us live from Dhaka. Thank you very much, Mr. Chaudhry, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now looking at this, what's the situation in Bangladesh now, and what responsibilities does neighboring countries, particularly India, have in responding to extradition calls of Sheikh Hasina amid deepening political unrest in Bangladesh?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As you know that immediately after the November 17th verdict, where the RCT handed death penalty to Sheikh Hasina, the current Yunus regime began media campaign with the target of exerting pressure on India to extradite Sheikh Hasina. At the same time, the regime has declared they are going to seek collaboration or help from Interpol in getting Hasina returned to Bangladesh from India. With this kind of the situation, as we know that under the extradition treaty, any government has the right not to send anyone back to the seeking country if they think that the trial has something to do, it has political motivation. So under this particular case, and please note that International Crimes Tribunal has nothing to do with the International Criminal Court. It is a totally local entity.
Okay.
Now, when Sheikh Hasina's extradition treaty demand for extradition is increasing, intensifying in Bangladesh, there have been protests are taking place in Dhaka city and outside the city, mostly by the pro-Yunus political forces, including National Citizen Party, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and they are demanding ban on Awami League and 14 other political parties by branding them as collaborators of Awami League. These protesters also are openly chanting anti-India slogan on the streets and even calling upon people to boycott India. So this is something that centering this Sheikh Hasina's extradition issue. Now some political parties, anti-India political parties, they are trying to play the anti-India card, and at a certain stage, even anti-Hindu card in this country.
Right. And how is this escalating violence against the Hindu minority influence both domestic and political dynamics with India?
You see, atrocities on Hindus began right after the last year regime change. And for your kind information, only yesterday, the Jamaat-e-Islami's Amir, top leader, Dr. Shafiqur Rahman, have publicly declared that during the next year's, the election in February 2026, he said on the election day, there will be genocide. So it means they are hinting, Jamaat-e-Islami, that they may begin genocide on Hindus. So it's a very alarming statement for Bangladesh for India and the international community, because any political top leader of a party which is going to contest in the next election, he is openly talking about genocide. And then, I mean, this is very dangerous, and I am feeling extremely worried for the security and safety of Hindus, Christians, and other religious minorities in my country.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Shoaib Chaudhry for joining us today from Dhaka and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to China, Japan. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has accused Japan of crossing a red line after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a military response from Tokyo. Wang has called the comments shocking and has said that they send a danger signal on the sensitive Taiwan issue. The row, now in its third week, has rapidly expanded into one of the biggest China-Japan crises in years, affecting trade and even cultural exchanges. Beijing has formally raised the matter with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, accusing Japan of interference and vying to defend its territorial claims. Tokyo has dismissed China's statements as entirely unacceptable, insisting its commitment to peace remains unchanged. Meanwhile, Taiwan has criticized China's letter to the UN, calling it malicious and a violation of the UN Charter. Wang has warned that China will hit back to safeguard its sovereignty and said the world may need to re-examine Japan's military history if Tokyo continues on this path. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Asta Chadha. She is a Ritsumeikan University Associate Professor of International Relations, joins us live from Kyoto. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now,
good to see you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, what are the possibilities and scenarios that could arise now that China has escalated the dispute to the United Nations and also invoking or highlighting Japan's military history?
I mean, absolutely. Given the fact that Japan this time is making the statements that Japan has made, specifically tying together the Taiwanese security with the possibility of Japan invoking its collective security, in order to make sure that Japanese presence is maintained in the East China Sea. That in itself in Tokyo is being looked at as a shift. Sort of not an entire overhaul, but definitely kind of a shift in Japanese foreign policy, specifically linked to the East China Sea, security. That's one. Two, Chinese response to the same by cornering Japan, though on one hand, China continues to engage with the United States in making sure that conflict escalation does not take place. But this in itself, these statements do show one side of conflict escalation by China, be it diplomatic, be it on the world stage at the United Nations, or even in the aspects of people-to-people exchanges. Two things are very, very clear. One, China can definitely always invoke Japanese militaristic history and make sure that the on-the-ground sentiment in China against Japan, can be stoked in order to make sure that the Chinese public does agree with the Chinese stance. And this is precisely what China is doing. And two, this time China seems to be rallying support at the international stage by calling Japan as, one of the outliers when it comes to security discussions. So the implications of these statements and these actions on both sides are very, very severe, because this is the time when US has pledged its allegiance to Japan, has pledged its support to Japan, just the way in some way US pledges its presence and support in East China Sea or South China Sea or in the Pacific. But Japan knows very well that under the Trump administration, Japan needs to make sure that it has its own defense capabilities in place as well. So that is one. And two, under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, the Japanese too are looking at their own foreign policy in a very different light, because never before had the Taiwan issue been so outwardly linked to Japanese security and Japanese self-defense forces. And three, China seems to be in some way, at least verbally, at least diplomatically, in a very combative mode, because for them a red line has been crossed, and that red line precisely was the fact that Taiwan issue, which China considers a domestic issue, has been brought onto the international stage as a bilateral or possibly a multilateral security issue. So China bringing it to the United Nations or calling Japan out as an outlier in terms of security discussions, or pointing out to Japanese military history should be seen precisely in those terms as China trying to sideline Japan, or maybe, push Japan into one single corner to show to the world two things: that one, China has the capability to resist Japan, both diplomatically and, if possible, then militarily or with force and coercion. And two, China is trying to send a signal to a lot of other US allies who at the moment might not have made official statements, but it would serve as some sort of a symbolic deterrence to any other US ally that does want or could claim in the future that Taiwanese security is somehow linked to their own security or to their defense posturing in the East China Sea.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting all that. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Asta Chatta for joining us again and sharing that insight on this news. Thank you. Now we stay on this topic. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has recently stated that Japan could consider a military response if China ever attacked Taiwan. This remark from the Japanese Prime Minister came on the 7th of November and has since sparked diplomatic tensions between Tokyo and Beijing. Meanwhile, China has condemned these comments, stating that Japan is intervening in what it considers as internal territory. Beijing has also warned against any military involvement and reiterated its claim over Taiwan. Responding to Takaichi's remarks, several hundred Japanese protesters have gathered outside the Prime Minister's office in Tokyo earlier today. They have called on Takaichi to retract her statements and avoid any escalation in the ongoing diplomatic spat. However, the protesters also believe that Japan should refrain from agreeing to or accepting any possibility of Chinese military action or invasion in Taiwan. Let's listen in.
日本はそもそも台湾を自分たちの植民地にしたことがあったりです。日本は戦争でもアジアの国多くを植民地にして戦争を巻き込んだ歴史があって、それを日本は反省もまだきちんとしてないんですよ。戦争が起きるってことを前提にされているので、そうやって人の分断を煽って人の恐怖を煽るっていうことが戦争につながると、その言論そのものが人々の戦争につながるっていうことを私はこの撤回させるべき、その考えをそのものを改めるべきだと思います。
私は平和や民主主義というものは自分の国だけが平和であればいいと、自分の国だけが民主主義であればいいんだっていうものじゃないと思います。全ての国が平和でなきゃいけないし、あらゆる侵略は容認されちゃいけないし、あらゆる虐殺も差別も容認しちゃいけません。自分の国だけじゃなくて全ての国に対して。
Well, viewers, shifting our focus to the International Film Festival being held at Goa, India, where my colleague Uday Pratap Singh talks to Nicholas Rees, Lord Mayor of Melbourne, as Rees speaks on India-Australia ties. Let's listen in.
Capital of Australia, Melbourne. I couldn't be more pleased to be here.
Yes. Tell us a bit about this memorandum of understanding that has been signed, in fact, today, in fact, a few of them, and this collaboration that we're going to see in the next few weeks and months between India and Australia.
We've signed 3 major agreements today, which are very, very important. And I've got to say, they're going to deliver a win for students in both our countries, a win for filmmakers and storytellers, and a win for audiences as well. There's one agreement between the IICT and Deakin University in Australia, which will see hundreds of filmmaking students in both of our countries collaborating in both countries over the next 5 years. There's another agreement which will see our 2 major film festivals working more closely together. That means more filmmakers from both of our countries doing work in each other's countries. And then finally, there's been a major film distribution agreement signed, which will mean that more Australian films will have a pathway to audiences here in India, which is a great result for us in Australia and for Indian audiences who we hope will enjoy our Australian movies.
Exactly. Well, every year, of course, a lot of Indians enjoy the festival that happens in Melbourne, IFFM. But how are you enjoying IFFI in Goa?
It's unbelievable. You know, the Indian film industry is like nothing else. The razzmatazz, the glamour, everybody is so good looking. And so I just love getting amongst it. It's brilliant. It's absolutely the best.
How much do you like Indian movies, and who's your favorite actor or actress?
Look, I am a little bit of an Indian film buff myself. Not only do I officiate at the Indian Film Festival in Melbourne. I also make sure I get along to all the movies. And last year I had the great honour of meeting my hero, Ram Charan. I actually met him on the 15th of August, Indian Independence Day, at our major square in Melbourne. And thousands of people had turned up to see Ram. And I was there with him. I got my selfie, ticked that off my bucket list. And he was a very cool guy, and all my Indian friends and brighter friends in Melbourne were very jealous.
And final question then, where do you see India-Australia relations as well going, in the next few months and years? We've seen a lot of areas of collaboration that Prime Minister Modi has often spoken about as well, about this India-Australia partnership. How do you see relations and ties between the two nations currently?
Look, I think we have a very special relationship between Australia and India, and I think it's only going to get stronger in the years and decades ahead. We have a very large Indian diaspora in Australia, well over 1 million people, and that is a human bridge between our two countries. I know our Prime Ministers get on very well. We are very excited about the WAVES initiative, and we hope to see that possibly expand in Australia. So on so many fronts, I think the relationship is only going to grow in the decades ahead, and from an Australian perspective, that is something that we very much welcome.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your time here.
Thank you. It's great.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news